Second week in a row that the Pac-12 has made some news on a Monday. This time it's Texas State joining the Pac-12 as the 9th overall member and the 8th all-sports member. I'm John Canzano. You can read me at johncanzano.com. He's Jon Wilner. You can find him at wilnerhotline.com. Hit that subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube. Wilner, we've got a big guest. Teresa Gould, the Pac-12 Commissioner, will be joining us. We've got a lot of questions for her.
There's a lot of questions still to be resolved for the Pac-12. Might as well go straight to the top, see what she can talk about. I think the ongoing negotiations with media rights, discussions about membership, I don't know how detailed she's going to get, but we gotta try to get a few answers. And she's very gracious enough to join us here. You know, certainly a busy week for her.
Yeah, look, I don't think they're done from an expansion standpoint. It may be football only. It may be basketball, or all other sports. Who knows what they're going to do? But I want to ask her about that. We've got ongoing media rights. There's some pieces here that are not revealed. Overall strategy of the conference, and frankly, what it feels like to have, this reconstituted conference that's got viability now and is NCAA compliant and CFP compliant. And so, I guess without further ado, let's go to headquarters.
Teresa, thanks so much for joining us. You know, it certainly wasn't lost on a lot of folks, I think, that you all announced Texas State as the newest member on the 3rd anniversary of USC and UCLA announcing their departure. You've been in this thing on the front line for 3 years. How's it feeling at this point? Like 30 years or like 3 months?
Well, John, I will tell you, I've slept a lot better the last couple of nights, if I'm being fully honest. It's really exciting and candidly, personally, really rewarding to get to this point and to have 9 incredible members, have the league continuing long into the future, to have an anchor media rights partner. All of those things, all of those milestones are really important. And it's been an exciting week.
Give us an idea of, you're in there, the discussions about Texas State as it's leading you to San Marcos, Texas, and that campus and that school as the 9th member. What were the things that mattered to you?
Well, I think we've been really consistent in our leadership room with our presidents and our athletic directors. We've been really consistent about what we're looking for, right? And we've been very patient and I think very disciplined about kind of sticking to those criteria and sticking to who we're trying to be and making sure that any institution we bring into the fold is aligned, right? We want to make sure top to bottom that we have alignment on several things. First and foremost, that we're going to compete at the highest level. And this league has always done that. We've always been a top 5 league. Our aspirations are to continue to be a top 5 league. That requires investment. And I will say with Texas State and their leadership, with their president and their athletic director, both of whom are incredible people, they are aggressive, they're relentless, they're going to invest, they're going to position themselves to compete at the highest level. If you've watched in particular their football program compete over the last couple of years, they're a gritty, hard fighting program, and they were a perfect fit in terms of our competitive aspirations. I would also say institutionally where they're headed and the trajectory that they're on, and really developing and establishing a brand, not only in their region, but nationally, was also aligned. And I would say thirdly, we want everybody in our room, every president, every AD, every head coach, every staff member of the Pac-12, to be forward-thinking individuals that are thinking about the future and what's to come in our industry, not what's behind us. And I think, the president and athletic director and others at Texas State are very much forward thinking and kind of have that relentless, bold mindset that we're looking for in our room to build something that's equipped for the future of our industry.
It seemed like SMU had that a year or two ago when they were thinking about maybe getting in the Pac-12 and the ACC. Do you think some of that boldness and aggressive mindset is rooted in the fact that football is such an important piece of culture in Texas?
Well, I think, John, that's one of the exciting things about having an institution in Texas is it's really clear that, first and foremost, let's start with football. They care about college football in the state of Texas, and they invest in college football. They put resources into it, and the community and the state cares deeply about college football. So that matters. I would also say across the institution and all of the great things that they're doing at Texas State, their fans and their community are really passionate. And, when I looked last night at some of the metrics and analytics of the engagement after Monday's announcement, it's off the charts. It is absolutely off the charts how much people in the state of Texas and all over the country have engaged in Pac-12 news over the last couple of days. And I think some of that is a byproduct of the state of Texas and the fandom and how passionate their fans are.
I reported, I think, in the lead up to the announcement that the presidents in the new look Pac-12 had talked about a scaled distribution from a distribution standpoint to Texas State. Can you tell us where you landed on half a bowl of soup, a cup of soup, a full bowl of soup? Where did this end up?
Where did this end up? Well, John, I think we're not going to comment publicly on any of our membership agreements, right? Across all 9 of our programs, we're not going to share the details of those private agreements. I think it would be more appropriate for you to talk to President Damphus about that. But we both feel really, really good about where we landed on the agreement and are excited about having them as a fully participating member in the future.
Could you address the travel situation? Not necessarily for football because it's such a one-off deal with the charter flights, but the other sports, Denver, if you're trying to do travel partners in some way, shape or form, right? I mean, it's a couple hours, Denver to Austin, right? How do you envision that going, or is that an evolving process based on additional membership decisions?
It is an evolving process, John, based on a number of things. I will tell you, we did spend a lot of time, both from a Pac-12 perspective and from a Texas State perspective, evaluating travel considerations. Like, given what's happened in our industry over recent years, that was really important to us, that we were really, really clear about what would it mean in terms of the student athlete experience, right? What would that travel look like for a student athlete? How far away from major airports are our markets, right? How much time are they going to spend away from campus? What are the costs associated with that? So we were very diligent about doing that analysis. And I will say from Texas State's perspective, it wasn't a factor. And they felt like, given the location of our campuses proximate to major airports, that it was very doable and would actually be an improved experience for their student athletes over what they have now in the Sun Belt. But in terms of the schedule, John, like, part of the exciting thing about having a blank slate is we can do things differently, right? There's the traditional way of doing and thinking about schedules. And I think we're challenging ourselves and our athletic directors to say, is that the right way to continue to do things? We have to have a league schedule. We have to crown conference champions. We also have to make sure we're positioned to have really strong, competitive, nationally interesting non-conference schedules. So we're thinking about everything in terms of what that will look like. But we feel like we did our due diligence in terms of travel and feel very confident about the situation we're putting our student athletes in.
Forward thinking, there's potential for football only edition or maybe additional membership. What kind of strategy are you guys talking about as it pertains to what comes next?
Well, John, I don't think anything has changed in that regard. I think we've been extremely patient and extremely disciplined around sticking to the plan and sticking to our aspirations and making sure that as we're evaluating additional members, whether they're football only, basketball only, full membership, that they are members that are actually adding value in the areas that are important to us, that they're adding value in terms of the competitive metrics that we want to achieve, that they're adding value in terms of our national brand and how we're perceived in the marketplace, that they're adding value economically in terms of our commercial enterprise, and that they're adding value in our leadership room. And I cannot reinforce that enough. And the three of us have all talked about this probably one-off, the importance of, at the board level, at the AD level, having alignment top to bottom. Who are we trying to be? What is it going to take? And are you willing to invest? And I am ecstatic that we have 9 institutions and 9 presidents and 9 ADs that are all on the same page in that regard. And that will be a factor and a consideration. We know that on any of these campuses, presidents and ADs turn over. That's just the reality. But we are really interested in hearing from the communities and their boards about what their aspirations are for their institutions so that that alignment is sustainable over time. Certainly Texas State had that, and any other members that we consider in any form will need to have that as well.
Do you view any new members, full members, basketball only, football only, is that an issue you got to have those schools in by next July? Or could you add a basketball only member, say, in 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, John, we now that we are at a point where we have reached the milestone we needed to reach to be an official FBS conference from an NCAA perspective and CFP perspective, we certainly have time to be able to be thoughtful around any additional members. There's no timeline, there's no deadline. As we think about different iterations of schedules, we will be prepared for any iteration, and we will have different options and be flexible in terms of what that looks like. Certainly, we want to be fair to our membership in terms of their ability to schedule non-conference games and all of that, but we're not going to rush into any decisions and do something just because it's being driven by development of a schedule. I think we've learned over the last couple of years, we can be pretty creative with scheduling.
Have you guys, are you at all waiting to see the resolution on the CFP format for 26 and also NCAA tournament expansion before you make additional membership decisions?
John, I don't think either one of those decisions will drive a different membership strategy necessarily. I think those formats, what happens with the NCAA basketball tournament, what the format is for CFP, and how programs access that may drive what our schedule looks like, what our championship looks like how we build the operational structure of the league. But I don't know that those things are going to inform who we add, because our vision is still the same.
Yep.
We want to be in the CFP every year. We had half of our league in the NCAA tournament last year. Those are certainly our expectations. So to me, it's more about who are the programs that are out there that are aligned with what our aspirations are. And then the formats and the expansion of the NCAA tournament, all those things will kind of inform maybe the mechanics and the operations of our league, more so the strategy around membership.
Can you help a little bit? It came up, I think, a month or two ago that sort of the blessing that Oregon State and Washington State had, the right they had to either give their blessing to whatever happened next, or, I know everyone had a vote, but what role did Oregon State and Washington State in the 11th hour, do they have to sort of give their blessing on what happened, or how does that work in that boardroom?
Yeah, well, I would say a couple of things. There is tremendous respect and kind of admiration for what Oregon State and Washington State did to get us to this point. It was actually quite fun and enjoyable over the last couple of days, seeing the group text message chains going around with presidents and ADs, and seeing the level of gratitude that our new members have, that Oregon State and Washington State stayed in the fight and invested the way they did to allow the Pac-12 to continue. So I would want to start with that, because I think that's really important. And then I think from a governance perspective, Oregon State and Washington State during this grace period do have some additional governance authority around things like membership and media rights until the new league launches.
What have you learned about managing a board over the years? Because that is, you mentioned it earlier, that is a critical piece for any commissioner to make sure that everyone is on the same page. What's your philosophy on that?
Yeah, John, I've learned a lot. I get that question a lot when I speak, to industry panels and things like that. And obviously over the last, 3 years, I've had a front row seat to lots and lots of interesting board dynamics.
To what not to do. That's my own personal interjection there.
What I would say, here's what I said I've learned. Number one, building relationships and trust and credibility, and really one-on-one, not with them necessarily just as a group, but one-on-one, building individual relationships with every single president and really spending time with them one-on-one to establish that trust and credibility is critical. And I do that. I have standing meetings with every one of them to make sure that we're staying close and that I'm always hearing from them. And usually my approach is very much like, what would you like to see me do differently? What advice do you have for me? What things would you like to see me spending more time on? And I'm very open-minded to getting a lot of day-to-day feedback from them. So that's one thing. I would say the second thing is really keeping my ear to the ground in terms of the pulse and like, how are people feeling? What are people thinking? And how are they experiencing us as the new Pac-12? What experience are they having in the boardroom? What experience are they having with my team? So those are probably the two things. And then just a lot of transparency. I think anybody that knows me, I'm a pretty, emotions on the sleeve kind of person. So I don't hold back. I'm pretty open and honest with them. And I think they appreciate that. So those are probably the things, John, that I've tried to employ, is a lot of one-on-one time, getting to know each other, establishing trust and credibility, keeping my ear on the ground and the pulse of what they're thinking, feeling, and experiencing with us. And then also just a lot of direct honesty, transparency, and candor.
I know early on when you had just Oregon State and Washington State on your board, we had a conversation about why it was important to you to rebuild the conference. Your eyes got glassy. And I think that resonates with people in a world that feels impersonal at times. This is very personal to you, isn't it?
It is very personal. They got glassy a lot this week too, to be honest with you, because I'm not sure I've taken the time to kind of stop and go, we did this. Like, we did this. We are securing the future of a conference that has a long legacy, that has a long history, that means something in our footprint and means something nationally in our business, and that also stands for something around supporting student athletes. And one of the things I'm the most excited about and the most proud of is the Pac-12 has always been a leader in supporting student athletes, whether it was being the first league that had student athletes as part of our governance structure, the first league to require mental health resources, like all the things. There's such a long legacy of supporting student athletes in a way that other conferences were not. And one of the things I'm the most excited about this new Pac-12 and it continuing long into the future is providing more student athletes with an opportunity to be supported by a conference that I believe cares about student athletes and puts them at the center.
Teresa, there's a ton of stuff going on with your conference here, and we don't want to keep you too long. I was wondering, just in terms of drilling down on a couple of specific issues, where does Las Vegas stand? I mean, the city as a host of her championship events and other things, where does that stand in your thinking with your basketball tournament, your football championship game starting next year?
So, John, look, Las Vegas is an important community in the sports ecosystem. That's just the reality, right? They've become the destination for sports of all kinds at all levels. And fans and communities love to go to Las Vegas. And it is critically important to us that our student athletes play in front of environments where they will be supported and cheered on and have energy in the arenas and in the stadiums. Like, that's really important to us. Our student athletes deserve that. They work really hard. They should play in front of big crowds. That being said, because we have this blank slate opportunity, we're in the process of figuring out what sports we're having championships in, what those formats look like. We're certainly open-minded to having our championship events and our kind of premier events in any city that's interested and willing to have a conversation that meets our criteria. But Las Vegas will certainly be a consideration as part of that.
Is there a timeline for you guys to nail that down? I know you got a million things going on, so Where is that sort of on the table for you?
I would say, John, at least in what I would consider to be our most premier events, football, men's and women's basketball, baseball is going to be a big one in our new league as well. I think, there's a economic and commercial opportunity associated with all of those events. And we certainly want to be out in the marketplace selling those events and bringing in partners to support those events in the fall. So I would say some of those neutral site kind of high profile events are the priority here in the coming months. And certainly CBS and the other media rights partners that we're having discussions with are also interested in being part of that and having clarity around those decisions.
Where does the bowl situation stand? I think the contract cycle ends after this season for everyone, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Okay, so looking ahead, 2026 football season, the new Pac-12 bowl alignments, that's all to be determined then, I gather?
It is all to be determined. You're correct, John, in that all of those agreements, like as we go into the fall of 2026, all of those discussions are happening across all of the conferences, and our football operations team are very deep in those discussions with our existing bowl partnerships. We've been very clear with our ADs about, kind of what we're trying to accomplish with that. And with our bowl partnerships, we kind of have three imperatives that we're focusing on. One of them is we want to own the West. Meaning, for the premier bowls that are in our footprints, we want to have access to those because of what it means to our communities and what it means to our fans. We want to play top level opponents, right? If we're going to continue to be a top 5 league, the opponent on the other side of the bowl game needs to be a top 5 league. And we're really pushing to try to accomplish that with as many bowls as possible. And then obviously the economics also need to be right in terms of supporting the experience for our student athletes and our fans, and making it economically viable for our programs to go. But Merton and Shauna are very much in those conversations, and we're getting a really positive response.
The branding of the Pac-12 has come up a lot lately. Obviously, it's important to you guys, but you even mentioned you want to be a top 5 league. Why is that important? That branding, top 5, still, there's a Power 5 undertone to it.
Well, John, there's a lot of either legislative designations through the NCAA or, kind of industry labels that are put on it. And I've been very intentional in avoiding that because they really don't practically mean anything. They don't have resource expectations around them. They don't have, competitive metrics attached to them. I think we are a top 5 league. When you look at what these schools have done over the last 4 years in the transfer portal and NIL era, we have been a top 5 league, and that's what our programs aspire to. And that's what we're going to continue to be.
What can you tell us about mediation? He asked the question that he knows can't get answered.
There's nothing new on mediation, John. We have a lot of important priorities, and that's certainly one of them. But there's no new news on that front that I can comment on.
Go ahead.
Does it? Let's talk about it without talking about it. But it does any kind of litigation, how does it impact sort of the decision making? Is it connected to media rights and expansion, or do you see these as independent things, or is anything ever independent in your world?
The mediation does not impact our strategy around media rights, around membership, around our other strategic priorities. It's certainly an important process that's out there that our presidents and athletic directors are interested in moving forward and resolving. However, it doesn't have a direct impact on anything else that we're doing.
Speaking of anything else, what can you tell us about timing of more media partners? Second, third, even fourth media partners? Are you close?
Timing wise, John, there is not a clear timeline or milestone or deadline for that. I will tell you, because of how those relationships impact other things like championships, like scheduling, planning for the future. Certainly, we want to move them forward here in the coming weeks, months, but we're going to be patient and make sure that we get it right. So no specific timing on that. We're continuing with those efforts. Again, we're building something new, and it's a bit of a Rubik's Cube fitting all this inventory into new packages because we are starting over, but it's going well. And I think we're really clear on what we're looking for, and we continue to have a lot of interest.
You've got a great basketball conference that is shaping up to be exciting. And I have to think, you've talked about transformational, not transactional partners. How big a role can basketball play in what happens next?
Basketball can play a huge role, particularly given not just the history and the kind of competitive success that we've had, but the strengths of the brands. Like when you walk in and you talk to these media rights partners, they are really, really excited about the basketball brands that we have. When you think of the Gonzagas and the San Diego States, and then all of the other programs, when you look at what Colorado State, did this year and what Utah State has done consistently over many years, there's a lot of interest in basketball and the value it brings to the table and what it can do to kind of elevate our brand and kind of our connected brand with our media partners.
Are you seeing that moving forward in terms of how media partners view basketball, streaming versus linear, high ratings versus tonnage? Is that shifting at all? The old thing about football is 80 cents on every media dollar, basketball is 20. Are you still seeing that, or is there a movement either way?
I do think it's shifting a little bit, John, only from the perspective of some of these high profile blue blood programs like a Gonzaga. When you look at their viewership is comparable on some level with high level football brands, right? And I think there is sort of a shifting mindset happening. I think the one thing that's really different is just the volume and the number of games that you have in the sport of basketball. But I am hearing a lot of shifting, and certain media rights partners are very dialed in on wanting a lot of quality college basketball.
Teresa, we can't thank you enough. Busy week, obviously, and appreciate very much you taking some time to clarify a few things, answer some questions for us, for viewers out there. There's obviously lots still to be resolved, but certainly it seems like you're on the track you had hoped to be on in terms of getting things checked off your to-do list.
We are getting there. Things are getting checked off the to-do list, and I really look forward to jumping in and starting to build the new house. It's going to be fun.
Teresa, thank you. Appreciate
you. Thank you so much, Teresa. Yep. Appreciate it.
Thanks, you guys. Nice to see you as always. Appreciate all your support.
You and I both interview a lot of conference commissioners. I don't think we interview conference commissioners who are as invested emotionally and invested with the length of the career that Teresa Gould has spent in the conference. Very different from Brett Yormark in the Big 12 or Jim Phillips or Greg Sankey or, Tony Petitti.
Well, and very different than Larry Scott and George Kliavkoff too, right? I mean, those guys had nothing to do with the Pac-12 when they took over. And Teresa has been involved for decades with the conference and with the schools out on the West Coast, living out on the West Coast. So, clearly, for the salvage operation that they've had to undergo in the last couple of years, having somebody who has that emotional connection certainly, I think, has probably helped them a ton.
Look, they get Texas State. They get that ninth school and the eighth all sports member. Now they're NCAA compliant, CFP compliant. There has to be a little bit of an exhale there, but they can't exhale for long because there is a scheduling element. I have to think new media partners, while they may not have cared, is it Texas State? Is it UNLV? Is it Memphis? Maybe those things were interchangeable. They need to know how many schools are coming in. They need to know the inventory, the tonnage that she referenced. Probably more important than who's going to be there is how many games are going to be there.
For sure, which makes you think, right, that the next few weeks are still going to be, full of news, I would think. Either they're going to add a couple of schools, either football or basketball only capacities, or they're going to go ahead with stage 2, stage 3 of the media rights. One of those things is going to probably end up having to happen here in the next few weeks.
And while she says mediation's not, there's no, it's not connected. I have to think that those expansion decisions, football only, basketball only decisions that are coming down the pipeline absolutely have something to do with the media rights deal. I think they've done a really good job. And I love what she said too about Oregon State and Washington State getting some love in that room, because I think those schools were scared. And I reached out to leadership at both those campuses this week just to ask how it was going. And I think there was a little pep in the step at Scott Barnes at Oregon State and Ann McCoy at Washington State, and the presidents as well, because they were there in that courtroom where like they were sort of wondering, were they going to have the resources to move forward? And they fought for it.
Yep. Well, I thought one of the sneaky revealing things she talked about was how she plans to manage the board, because she had a front row view as to how not to manage your board the last 6-8 years. Right. And some of the things she mentioned specifically is, making sure you understood the pulse, right? I think that was completely missing in different ways from the tenureship of the previous two commissioners.
Yeah. And they're getting a really ambitious, bold, chip on their shoulder Texas State, plays in the shadow of Texas and A&M, wants to matter. And, I can't help but notice the Boise State, Oregon State, Washington State, Texas State sort of theme that's going on. Is Gonzaga going to add state to the end of it? Like, this is a conference that's got a chip on its shoulder. And I think that matters.
It will be fascinating to see how it goes. The first couple of years, just like the last few, I think have been fascinating, especially with the backdrop of the changes in the NCAA tournament, potentially the CFP. What they're doing is not completely separate from what's going on with the postseason events. And so that adds a level of complexity to their decisions.
I am John Canzano. You can read me at johncanzano.com. He's Jon Wilner. Find him at wilnerhotline.com. Make sure you subscribe. Leave some feedback. Tell us in the comment section what the Pac-12 should do next from an expansion standpoint. They are not done. I don't think they're done. I think they're looking hard at value in football and in basketball, and I do expect them to make some moves. So it'll be newsy, and we'll have you covered here.
Thanks, everybody.